Yeah.
So if you come into my shop and you say, I have an idea, bearing in mind they're not very articulate, I have an idea for X, Y, Z.
Yes.
Now, either the service can be, okay, I will log you idea for X, Y, Z.
Yes.
You already have an issue
Yes.
because you're saying they're not articulate, so I need to interpret
That's right.
when I log, when
That's
I
right.
codify it. So there's an
Yes.
issue there.
Yeah.
There's a much bigger issue about, do you evaluate it at that point? Because I cannot imagine, and I
Yeah.
include myself,
Yes.
anyone who would have the breadth of expertise
Yes.
to evaluate in real time.
Okay.
So there's an issue about, do you separate the recording, or whatever you want to call it, the login of the idea
Yeah.
versus the evaluation? So I would suggest that you would need to separate those processes.
Yes.
Otherwise, I think you will get lots of things filtered out which had a lot of merit, because our knee-jerk, as we all know, we all have our prejudices and our
That's right.
biases. If somebody comes in who's not very articulate and said, I have an idea for A, and you say,
Yeah.
"No, I've sort of heard that before,
Yeah.
go away." But actually, what they have is something slightly different, but
Yeah.
they haven't articulated it well, or somebody hasn't evaluated it.
Yeah.
So I would see a separation of it, almost an offline process would be the evaluation.
Yes.
You might have industry experts,
Yeah.
retail,
Yeah.
finance who would evaluate it.
Yeah.
From the recording,
Mhm,
I think
mhm.
they're different skill sets as
Mm.
well. I wouldn't combine the two, because I think it's a bit like when you do, what do you call it, creativity workshops and that. If you do that sort of stuff, if you evaluate it in real time,
Mhm.
you tend to close down discussion and you tend to filter out a lot of very interesting stuff. You need to separate out, if you
Yeah.
like, the login recording from the evaluation. So
That's where that was a key word. You said that nobody would have the breadth of knowledge to
Yeah.
actually sort of like evaluate the idea right and then.
yeah,
Now, with that in mind, it's just social fiction basically, thinking that, let's say we are doing masters in innovation. Now, there might be a course which is like an honors degree in innovation. So a person is prepared in 4 years to be at least on that level
Yeah.
where they can be able to, they have all the knowledge necessary to judge an idea and,
Yeah.
and give an opinion.
I'm really
Yeah.
struggling with the idea that even the cleverest, most experienced person I know will
Yeah.
prematurely close things down, because we tend to frame things in our own experience. So
Sure.
a lot of the, if you like, a lot of the filtering or evaluation
Yes.
is very application specific. So somebody could come in and say, I've got an idea for a service, I don't know, I can't think of it, but blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And you might say, okay, I look at it.
Yeah.
Now, you can evaluate it as it's given, as
Yeah.
a service,
Yes.
but if you separate the process, you
Mm.
might have a panel of people say, well, it might not work as a service, but it
Mhm.
could work as an app.
Mm.
Or conversely, it wouldn't work as an app for
Mm.
these reasons, but
Mm.
it could be a face-to-face service.
Yeah.
So if you like, the evaluation, not simply I will or won't record this, or it has merit or not merit. It's one of, again, adaptation and development. So I think it would be very hard to have a specialist who had the breadth of knowledge of what's possible with informatics or retail or services. You could do a very crude filter,
Yeah.
but then I
Yeah.
think you'd end up filtering out lots of interesting things. So I still think there's an argument for separating out the recording and the evaluation.
Yeah. So in that case, can it be something like, you've got first line support, second line support, third line support. So depending on the merit of the idea, it can be
Yeah,
recorded.
like a triage.
Yeah, like a triage.
More
yeah.
like, you said it was like a doctor. It's
Yeah.
more like NHS Direct, that dreadful service. We have a triage. So then the person on the line is not an expert in medicine, and
Yeah.
often not even a nurse,
Yeah.
but they have a set of questions that standardise.
That's right,
And
yeah.
they say, does blah, blah, blah. And if it passes those filters,
Yeah.
it goes to these guys or it goes to those guys. So it's a
Yeah.
triage sort of filter. So I can imagine that.
Mm.
What I find harder to imagine is these highly experienced individuals who have sufficient breadth and depth
Yeah.
to evaluate almost in real time. I find that.
Yeah. But do you think some ideas can be are capable of evaluating real time?
Not if they're not well articulated. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously the more articulated and developed it is, the easier
Yeah.
it is to evaluate.
Yes.
The less well articulated it is, the
Mhm.
harder it is to see the merit in something.
Yeah.
It's easier to dismiss.
Yeah.
So the types of people you're describing,
Yeah.
if the real issue is the challenges, they're not very good at articulating
Yeah.
it.
Common people like didn't even go
whatever,
to school.
Yeah, exactly that.
Yeah.
It would be even harder
Yeah.
to make real-time evaluations because there's a lot of interpretation involved, because they won't be able to fully articulate what they. So I think what you'll have is a significant number of potential ideas, innovations that were prematurely rejected because
Yes.
they weren't articulated well,
Yes.
which I don't think is the purpose of the exercise. The purpose of the exercise, I think, is to capture as many as possible,
Yes.
at least initially,
Yes.
with a view to then evaluating them in some way.
So all these common people, those who are not articulated, those who doesn't have the knowledge to actually even doesn't even have the guts sometimes to actually express those ideas. But if there's a like a walk-in center or maybe there's a call center, do you think there would be people who might be calling, having limitation is that the funding probably would be by the government, sort of like Citizen Advice Bureau. So it's for the good of the people and also energize the grassroots innovation. Maybe out of 100, currently 15% idea works, according to research.
Yeah.
So maybe out of 100, maybe out of grassroots, there might be 3-4 ideas which are amazing. There's a possibility of that.
Yeah, there is, and also I think again, I keep saying the same thing because I do believe it. I think if you separated the recording from the evaluation,
Yes, yeah,
I think there's another potential benefit.
yes,
Is that if you have, I don't know, if you have a call centre or you have several drop-in sites locally, then they're making evaluations. But if they're just recording with as much fidelity as they can, and then pooling that, then there's also the potential of connections, because a lot of innovations happen, as we said, at the intersections. So you might have that idea
yeah,
doesn't convince me, that
Yeah.
idea doesn't convince me. If you
Yeah.
put them together,
Yeah.
I think there's something really interesting. That's never going to happen in real time because two people won't walk in. Chances
Yeah.
are close to zero probability.
yeah,
But if you separate the recording
yeah,
with the evaluation, you're
Yeah.
more likely to identify sort of connections. And I
Yeah.
think that's another argument for having at least another set of
as a
processes,
dimension, yeah,
another backroom offline exercise. I
Yeah.
think, I don't know, I suspect so, because if you look at companies that do that, like
Yeah.
IBM Jam and that, they've experimented with, having expert systems that evaluate and panels and all that sort of thing, and they've come to the conclusion basically you have to separate the recording from the evaluation, and
Yeah.
also you need to evaluate very quickly then to give feedback.
yeah.
Most people don't come again, so.
And in terms of equipment, I'm thinking of the walk-in
Yeah.
center still. I'm
Yeah,
thinking
yeah,
of walk-in
yeah.
center. Obviously, some ideas are complicated, some ideas are not.
Yeah.
So if they have, obviously the equipments were very expensive in the past, but slowly, because of the digitalization, the equipments are a lot less expensive. The 3D printers and the microwave.
Yeah.
So if you have all those equipments ready, then do you think that it would be sort of viable at all to have a walk-in center where common people can go and tell their ideas? It would be feasible at all in terms of UK or in terms of developing world?
Well, to some extent, when you say common people, they have to have some incentive to want to come to the centre or call the line.
Yeah.
So they're not, if you like, they're not just ordinary people. They have an idea that they
Yeah.
think has some merit.
Yes.
Otherwise they wouldn't take that opportunity. So
Sure.
they're not a million miles away from more developed services where you have, individual lifestyle entrepreneurs will go a bit like Citizen Advice Bureau and say,
Yeah.
I'm thinking of doing this.
Yeah.
What do I do, or should I do it? And,
Yeah.
and obviously, it's one step away from that.
Yeah.
They don't have a fully fledged business idea. What they have is an idea.
Mm.
But it's the same principle. So you have a set of expertise which can advise what to do next, and if it's, for example, manufactured product, then that's the sort of thing where you could prototype and such like.
Yeah. Yeah. It's prototype we're talking about
If
here.
if it's a product.
Yeah.
It may not be,
Prototype.
maybe,
Yeah.
maybe a service, but that's more problematic. But if it's a product.
The incentive might be is that people would come because if their idea is accepted, and sort of like the idea is that we make it for you free, everything is free basically. That's the one of the incentives. But obviously, if your product then is patented, if it is a unique idea, then obviously you receive the royalty. So that's where the incentives comes in for there to actually come and share the ideas.
Yeah.
And also on the other hand, probably you want to charge at least £10-20, I don't know, if they want to come and share the ideas, because if you charge something a nominal amount, then they will sort of
Makes it
prepare
more
it.
important, and it
Yeah.
also filters out the sort of people who can abuse. Yeah, I understand that.
Yeah, as people is abuse it.
Yeah.
And the other question I ask is that in terms like having a walk-in center in UK and having a walk-in center, let's say in Bangladesh or in India, I can tell about the Bangladesh. I think that would be awesome idea then, because people, the patent from Bangladesh is very low, but there are 162 million people. But whereas in the UK only 62 million people, but the patent is so high, super high. So, but obviously there are potential in those people as well, if they have the facility to actually tell their ideas and transfer their ideas, which they don't have at the moment. So for a context of Bangladesh, I think it would be better. It would be a good idea to actually have a walk-in center there. Do you think?
Well, you could argue there's a greater need
Yeah.
because there's less personal resource.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if I have an idea, then I may borrow the money or have the money to go to the patent office or,
Yeah.
or whatever,
Yes.
or the bank or new business advisor. But if you were several rungs away from that
Yeah.
financially, you wouldn't even consider that. So I think there, but that I wouldn't necessarily.
Yeah.
The intellectual property thing might be a bit misleading. I think the sort of prototyping and development idea
Yeah.
is a big thing, might be missing in the developing country context more so than here. I mean,
Yes.
Here,
Yeah.
you know, if I had an idea which needed a prototype,
Yeah.
I can think of 20 companies in Brighton I could go to
Yeah.
who would do it within 24 hours. You know,
Yeah.
not just 3D printing, but other type machining and such like,
Really? Okay.
and not that
Okay.
expensive. But
Yeah.
or if you're based at university, you'd find somewhere. But I
Yeah.
think the vast majority of people will be able to do that. So
Yeah.
I think in the area, particularly of product
Yeah.
innovation rather than services such like, and in the developing country context, where there's less individual financial resource,
Yeah.
I can see there's a stronger argument. If you like, there's less of a market failure here in the sense that, you know, it's relatively easy.
So I didn't get that part. Could you explain that one more time? Sorry?
It's easier
Yeah.
in the UK
Yeah.
to translate your idea into, say, a prototype.
Yes. Yeah.
Partly because there are more organisations that offer that,
Yeah.
and individually people are wealthier.
Yeah,
So you put
yeah.
it together, and it's not universal, but it's
Mhm.
relatively easy. It's
Yeah.
not. I wouldn't put that as a bottleneck
Yeah.
in this country.
Okay.
I can't talk for Bangladesh, but from what you're describing,
Well, UK,
I can imagine
yeah.
a significant
Yeah.
bottleneck
Yeah.
is to realise,
Yeah.
even if it's not necessarily a prototype, it could be just a translating a concept into something tangible,
Yeah.
because that might be the next step to take it to get more resource.
Yes.
Because you might not be, as you said, articulating.
Yeah.
But there's a big gap between idea articulation and a tangible example of that,
Yeah.
which you may then take to others
Yeah.
to get funding, for example. So I could see that.
So in the UK, for example, let's say in Brighton area, is there anything missing that would a walk-in center or a call center for the common people would add value to?
I
Thank you.
would suspect not,
Okay.
but I may be wrong.
Okay.
The reason I say that is because if you look at
Yeah.
what we've done, not what your Sprue's done, others on,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's a very low level of resource you need.
Yeah.
I'm not saying everyone, I'm
Sure.
saying, but there's a very low level of resource to be able to get,
Yeah.
you know, something made up for you,
Yeah.
whether it be 3D printing or textiles or machined. It's a very, very low hurdle.
Yeah.
Again, I'm not saying it's universal,
Yeah.
but I'm saying it's relatively simple.
Yes. Yeah. But articulating that idea, obviously, they can come, and sometimes the eureka moment is lost.
Yeah.
Lots of common people.
I'm not convinced
Yeah.
that there's that gap, because what you're describing is separate things.
Yes.
You're saying you've got 160 million whatever, and
Yeah.
you've got X number of patents as
Yeah.
an indicator.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then you've got 62 million, and then you've got
High number of
1,000 times
patents.
X.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think there's less of a, if you like, problem in the UK context,
That's right,
and therefore there's less of an opportunity.
That's true.
So I'm saying, actually, if you do have an idea,
Yeah.
you could probably figure out what to do next. I think and I don't know whether it's wealth level education or the amount of services that were wrapped around.
Yes.
I may be wrong, but I don't. From what I understand about entrepreneurship, particularly in the UK,
Yeah.
that's not a bottleneck,
Okay.
or not the number one bottleneck.
Yeah.
In other
Yeah.
contexts where
Yeah.
you may have lower education, less articulate, less
Yeah.
personal resources,
Yes. Yeah.
I could see it's been a significant bottleneck.
Yes.
So I could see an argument
Yeah.
for that type of service in a developing country context. I would find it harder to support that argument in a relatively wealthy,
Yeah.
relatively well-educated context where there are a range of services,
Yeah.
private and public, where you could seek advice.
So what can in Brighton area
Mm.
actually energize further grassroots innovation?
Well, there's probably hundreds of new business networks and groups, often
Yeah.
sector specific. So,
Yes.
for example, the Fuse network, which Sprue's done a lot of work on, that includes what do they call themselves now?
For common people, yeah.
Well, you've got to be careful of your terminology. It's not very precise. I mean, what does common people mean in the UK context?
Common people, in terms of defining common people, is basically those who are not very articulated
Yeah.
and have an idea but doesn't know how to put it forward,
Yeah.
and so
Yeah.
facilitating them. When I say common people,
Mm.
do you think there's still quite a few things to do, or to so that grassroots innovation? Those,
Honestly, I don't know.
yeah,
My feeling
yes,
is, as I said, I don't think that's a huge bottleneck in the UK.
okay,
I'm willing to be persuaded otherwise. I can understand the logic in other contexts
Yes.
where there's a big divide between, a mass of people who potentially have a lot of ideas,
Yes.
to use your term,
yeah,
but don't have the education to articulate
yeah,
or the personal finances to
Sure.
develop. I can
Sure.
understand there are at least two strong arguments for that.
yeah,
I may be wrong. Maybe there is a need in developed economies. I'm not aware of any evidence of that,
Mhm.
but it may be that nobody's looked at it. I don't know.
So walk-in center or call center, does it add any value at all? Does it have potential to add any value at all in the context of UK for the common people? When I say the way I define common people.
I can't see how. Because, separate the two things. One
Yeah.
is one of capturing the idea,
Yes.
and one is evaluating the idea.
Yeah.
Now, the capture, why is that an impediment? What difference does it make if I'm a common person in the UK or a professional in the UK?
Yeah.
To capture it, I'm talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. Capture. Yeah.
What difference does that make? I don't understand.
Obviously, like initially you said that you get different ideas,
Yeah.
you capture them, and then you actually add them together, and then there might
Yeah,
be
yeah.
other ideas, and out of 100 there might be 2 ideas
Yeah, yeah, I
which could be
understand.
amazing.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not convinced. I'm not convinced. Yeah. I'm not saying
Okay.
it's not the case. I'm saying
Yeah.
I'm not convinced.
Yeah.
There are people in other groups,
Yes.
the energy group,
Mm.
sustainability group, have done a lot more grassroots innovation,
Yes.
more in collectives than individuals.
Collective.
So it's more about communities, like
Yes.
housing communities,
Yes.
rather than individuals.
Yes.
We're trying to understand how you capture some of that.
Yes.
So there may be people in those groups who
Yes.
have a better idea of are there really opportunities here or not.
Yes.
I honestly say I am not aware of them.
Or niche. Yeah. Yeah.
Doesn't
Mm.
mean they don't exist.
Yeah.
So I would look at some of the work they're doing
Yeah. Yeah.
on sort of,
Sure.
on grassroots and inclusive innovations. There's a lot of work in that sort of area.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
That's all.
So you think of do this practically or for your dissertation or both?
I
I'm
am
not sure.
thinking of doing it for the project. Obviously, I'm collecting data.
Yeah.
One thing I have found that there is no walking center basically where you can literally go on ideas. So
Yeah.
I know whether it's a niche market that I'm not sure about, but the one thing is for sure that sometimes when I speak to the students, I spoke to 30 students,
Mm.
and they said, yeah, if there's a walk-in center or a call center, because they think the eureka ideas
Mm.
sometimes get lost. Almost 97% people said, yeah, they had the eureka moment, and their ideas got lost
Mm.
because it's just too cumbersome
Yeah.
to make an idea into a product
Mm.
to the supermarket.
Yeah.
So it's like a long process, and it's too much. But if there was an incentive, somebody like us who was doing master's innovation, to help those for free, basically, then they would probably call or they would probably come.
Yeah. Yeah. I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just from the 30 students I've done a survey, and 97% said, yeah, they have lost the eureka moment, so they have lost the great ideas.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
But do have a look at the people who work in those sort of areas, because
sure.
there is a lot of research in those areas that I'm not familiar with,
Yeah.
and it may be that there have been experiments or trials in that area. I can't tell you because
Yeah.
I literally don't know.
Yes. Yeah.
So I wouldn't restrict it to Brighton area, but more generally see if there are examples where they've had
Yeah.
those attempts, because there are lots of within Europe generally, there are lots of funded projects to
Yes.
try to capture
Yeah.
localised knowledge,
Yes.
not necessarily individual, what we call common people, but
Yeah.
localised knowledge, non-expert or non-professional knowledge,
Yes.
and how they've gone about that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it'd be worth looking at that.
Yeah, I'll speak to Professor Adrian Smith. He's into grassroots innovation.
All right, okay. Yeah.
So I have already made an appointment to see him next
Yeah,
week.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Good. Good.
Thank you, Joe.
Okay.
Thank you. You have a nice evening.
I will do.
Okay.
Yep.
Bye-bye.
Okay. I'll
Bye.
see you next week.
Thank you.
Okay.